and away we go. Welcome to the Tuesday night Big Book Workshop. My name is John, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. Sobriety date is January 7th, 2020. This workshop is facilitated by Tony.R and myself tonight. I will keep everybody muted for the duration of this workshop, except for the facilitators. Any inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated, and you will be removed by one of the co-hosts. If you get removed by accident, we apologize. There's lots of Zoom bombers and people click on them and the screens change. You might get booted and you can't get back in, and that's happened once or twice, so we apologize to anybody that's happened to. Please note we'll be taking questions after the meeting, so please write them down. And how we open this meeting is with the set-aside prayer. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, this book, my disease, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so that I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. And have an amazing meeting, and here we go. Don't forget to unmute, Tony.
Right on. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date is April 8, 1989. I got not my first introduction to the fellowship, but it was my first introduction to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that we've been going through in great detail here. And tonight is not going to be any exceptions to that. I'd ask you really to have an open mind tonight, because we're going to talk about something that's really kind of misunderstood in the approach where we're at in the book, right? Because a lot of times the book will talk about something and then we'll resort to what we think it's saying, right? We'll resort to our interpretation or our understanding, and we miss the point that it's trying to get across to us, right? And it happens. It's so subtle. It's so subtle how it happens, and it's kind of interesting. So we're on page 44, 45, and it's going to be a shift in conversation here. And what's interesting is in the fellowship, a lot of times, all the way through the book, did they start with their understanding of the solution first, or the understanding of the problem? They started the understanding of the problem, and that there was a solution. And then every time they used the example of the solution, they kind of reiterated people who were afflicted with this illness. They were explaining the solution, and they went through a course of action. Would that be kind of correct? And in the doctor's opinion, he talked about this message had to have depth and weight. Had to move past the cheese factory, which I call our thinking, into the consciousness of our being, right? And all the way through here, they talked about a process and an experience, yes? Kind of, yeah. And then they asked us at different times to refer to the spiritual appendix so we understand who's talking about, what they're talking about, right? So if we kind of look at the same way with step one, how many people had a totally different understanding of step one before going through this process and after going through this process?
Oh, yeah.
Right? But a lot of us give you the impression, or we had the impression, that I knew what step one was before I did it. Anybody? And I knew I was an alcoholic beforehand, and we had the fellowship talk. Anybody? And that was in regards to the solution. To the problem. And then when you went through here, you kind of went, holy smokes, I never knew any of that. I would have never came up with any of that information as the result of the characteristics of alcoholism. Anybody? Like the allergy, right? That kind of made sense. Or the malady that centers in the mind, it makes sense. And the blind spot, the phenomena, I would have never came up with any of that stuff. And even when we explain it, we always explain it as something outside of ourselves, as in a parking lot doing push-ups, or an event that we'll be able to see, or an event that we haven't learned our lesson about, or an event, right? Like most people, when they talk about, we had a couple guys long-term sobriety giving us the impression that they could stay sober as a result of your relapse, which kind of tells me they don't understand step one. And another guy who was 16 years sober, and says, everything was going great, and he forgot he was an alcoholic and took a drink. So so we understand, well, his understanding is a lot different than our understanding, right? Yes?
Yep.
So when we got to page 44 here, it kind of broke it down into a simplest form of the summary of what we learned in the previous chapter. So we're going to hit the ground running here. So go ahead, page 44, and we'll break it down to the if part. Go ahead.
All right.
Everybody there? Yep.
Yeah, we agnostics. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism.
Okay, right there. I guess we're going to stop there. Did we learn something of alcoholism? Hopefully. So whose understanding do we have? Ours or theirs?
Theirs. Should be theirs.
Yeah, and now it's collective because we have the same understanding as they do, right? So what I ask my sponsees is what that is. And hopefully they take me to the doctor's opinion. They explain the allergy. They explain that there's a condition psychologically that these people are different than other people. And they go on to explain in 23 this malady, right, that centers in the mind, that places them beyond human aid, right? And then when they get to more about alcoholism, the first part about it is why we can never safely take a drink again, what makes us different than other people, right? By the time they start getting to page 33, they talk about this phenomenon that takes place in our brain, this unexplainable event where it makes sense for us to have a drink regardless of our experience, which places us beyond human aid. Then that tells me they're ready to move on. Right? And what I usually do is I ask them to think about their last relapse, right? And I ask them to explain to me what they could have done differently. Right? And if they start saying phone somebody, not pick up, pray, then I realize they didn't listen to a single thing that they've been reading. When they go to me, there's nothing I could have done about my past relapse. That was the illness having me and me not having it. And that's what placed me beyond humanity. It was inevitable that I was going to drink again. And that was the step one confirmation. That tells me this person had the step one experience. Right? And then I'll ask, well, what can we do about the future one that's coming? And he says, that's what this solution's about. Right? I need to enter this daily reprieve that I read about, that I heard about, this reliance on something greater than me, right? That we've talked about through here. And they give examples on, right? Then we laid out the solution we found, right? So go ahead.
So we hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic.
Have they done that?
Yes.
So if you've gone through the first portion up to this point, including the doctor's opinion and the forwards, and the spiritual appendix, because it asks us to read that. If you've got all that information, right, you have the basis of steps 1 and 2. And not only that is, I know what type of alcoholic I am, which is critical. I never knew what type of alcoholic I was for the first 11 years in and out of the fellowship, thinking I was in the program. When somebody explained this to me, and I went through it with them, I knew I was the type beyond human aid. I was a real alcoholic, suffering from both conditions of the body and mind. And that reemphasized.
There's different types?
Pardon? Yeah.
You mean there's different types?
Well, there's the potential alcoholic, right? There's the heavy drinker, right? It has the characteristics. So it's important that we have the step 1 experience. Because when we don't have the step 1 experience, what's the basis of our understanding is we could fix us with us. Anybody been there? Not in this group, right? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
So if, when you obviously want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take.
So then there's 2 symptoms. So what I see now is I never came here to stop drinking. I came here because I couldn't stop. Big difference. Right? I came here because I couldn't stop. Right? And so now there's only the 2 things. You notice that all the way through this thing, they've only asked me 2 questions so far. And this is a summary. If, when you honestly want to, you find you can't quit entirely, yes or no. Look over your drink. True. I've tried to quit many a times. I can't because of the allergy. Or when drinking, was I able to control the amounts I take? No. Why? Because of the allergy. Okay, why don't they ask us more questions? Because we're going to start bullshitting. It's our default. Anybody here? We don't even know we're bullshitting. It's just we're storytellers. We create stories that we're even comfortable with. Anybody? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll read that again. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer.
So they just told you the only option that we have for people like us. We may be suffering from an illness, not an illness which only
spiritual experience
will conquer. But how many people sat in meetings and were being offered all these other options? We read how it works for a specific reason, but we spend time talking about all these different topics like we'll be able to accomplish those things. Right? Let's avoid the life and death errand that we are, and we'll talk about acceptance. Right? Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Wouldn't that be nice, though, right? Then I wouldn't need to do any of these things. The delusion that I think I'm able to achieve that level of consciousness by doing nothing. Wouldn't that be nice? So our acceptance means this. Oh, I got a bill in the mail. Geez, I don't like this. It's making me upset. So you know what? I have acceptance of this now, and I'm going to let it go. I put it in a drawer. It's gone. Life is preparing me another bill. Anybody have that experience? I get another one in the mail, and it has red writing on it. I get upset at the bill for them sending it to me. And I realize, you know what? When I'm disturbed, that means there's something wrong with me. Nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And so I let that one go too. I have acceptance. I let it go. And then they cut my phone off, and I get upset, and I'm alarmed that they would do that to me. So we see ignoring stuff is our expertise. Gaslighting our own lives is an art form. And getting pissed off that we get a reoccurrent notice that life sends us. Anybody? Anybody get reoccurrence of the same notice by people, places, and things? Right? So, okay, so we see here, it has to be, there's a specific solution for a specific problem. So if the problem takes place in the mind, that places us beyond human aid, this change has to take place where? Within the mind also, right? Through spiritual aid. Go ahead.
To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of hopeless variety.
So what type of experience? A psychic change or spiritual experience. Now, did it ask me to go to what I think that means? Did it ask me to go with my own understanding here? No, they're very specific on their solution to this problem that they put this together. Right? So in the spiritual appendix, if we kind of go there for a fast second, we've read this already. Hopefully, how many people have gone through the spiritual appendix? So all the way through here, on page, what page you got?
It'll be 567.
560.
Or 183, I believe.
Yeah, mine's 183 in the small book.
Yeah.
So
567 or 183, depending on what book you got.
So we should have basically this understanding before moving on, because it's their understanding what they mean by a psychic change or spiritual experience, yes? The change that we need to acquire in order to recover from this thing. So it's not our understanding, it's their understanding on a collective experience, yes? I need to have the same experience. I like this new guy that I'm listening to. He goes, hello? He always says hello. See, he's listening. So they talk about here at the bottom, among our rapidly growing members. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, paragraph at the bottom of the page. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule.
And they're talking about suddenly the bright light one. Only the sickest people get that, right? And that's just to get them started where you are, beginning of this process. That doesn't mean they have this thing. It means they're able to make a beginning on this thing, to learn the recipe. I have a lot of people say, "Oh, I have this thing." Then going through this shouldn't be a problem for you, right? Because most of us think How many people used to think, "Oh, I have this," meaning I don't need to do this. Anybody have that thinking? I have this because I don't need to do it, right? See how the thinking is always wanting to take over, but we don't know that. But good sponsorship would smile when you said that and said, "Yeah, let's keep reading."
Perfect. So most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety.
And that's what we're doing here, right? And even if you had a spiritual, you still need the educational part of this thing to develop, right? Maintain for the rest of our lives. You still need a job description. You still need to learn the trade, right? You just happen to bypass the union requirements because you knew somebody, you got a direct hire. But you still need to learn the job. You still need to learn the spiritual requirements, right, for longevity. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, go ahead.
Because they develop slowly over a period of time.
Sometimes real slow.
What's that?
Sometimes real slow. Go ahead.
Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself.
So that kind of reiterates, when we read the promises, we think it's all about us. But the real true essence of the outline of the promises is the people around us start experiencing it before we do. They become more aware of the change than we do. Most of us go around trying to convince people how much we change. Anybody? And then we try to change everybody around us because now we're acutely aware of their problems. And I start working on mom and dad. They've been dealing with your ass for how many years, and all of a sudden you're the bright light in the family? Okay, right? We're funny that way, right? It's like, yeah, let me convince you how much I changed, and then we try to borrow 20 from them on the way out. Anyways, go ahead.
He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life.
He finally realizes. In the promises, we'll suddenly realize. So as the result, as a byproduct, somewhere along the line we'll go, hey, look at this. Look what's something different happening. It's like our alcoholism. We were the last ones to know we were afflicted with it. Everybody around us already knew. But when we became aware of it, it was like profound. It was a problem. Anybody? And that's the same thing on the spiritual development. So we start affecting everything around us. The same way our alcoholism affected everyone around us. Right? This thing is they talk about the transmission of this thing, that the example of this thing is pretty wild, how we start affecting people, places in a positive way. It's pretty wild. I hope a lot of you stick around to get to experience that. Go ahead.
That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months.
But when you think about that, how many meetings do we sit and listen to? Listen, this is the chapter this week. Listen to this. When you go to meetings, listen to how many people are changing themselves through their own efforts. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm working on this. I'm working on acceptance. I'm working on change. I'm working on I'm the big and powerful I am. They're still in stage 1 recovery. What's our first obsession is us. We need to get past us in order to incorporate this thing. But we don't know we're infected with us because we're the most important topic in the room. Us. Right? And when we we'll read through this, that's when a lot of us drank because we couldn't stand ourselves anymore. That's what anxiety is created from, was the overconcentration of self. The conflict within my mind is the inability to move past my own reality. Anybody? I need a different perspective. So when people talk about a solution or a different way of life or a different experience, it got my attention a bit. Because I no longer wanted to stay the same. I needed something different. And I didn't want to end up going back drinking again, because inevitably that will happen. If I can't stand me, how well am I going to survive with you? So sooner or later, the insanity is going to return again. Right? Okay, go ahead.
What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline.
Underline that, because they revisit that idea, what usually takes place in a few months. So within that few months period, my sponsor explained that to me as an act of providence, an act of grace taking place, the removal from the water into the lifeboat. I'm still dying, but I'm moving toward the amen. I'm being administered first aid where I wasn't in the water, right? I'm still afflicted with this thing, even though I'm sitting in a meeting. I'm in a lifeboat, but I need to be administered first aid if I'm going to survive this thing. Does that kind of make sense? I'm not out of the woods yet, right? What usually takes place in a few months. Underline that. We'll revisit that again a couple times. Go ahead.
With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to be back up. So, right? Which could have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. Why can't we just say, okay, I could do this within a couple of years? Because we're dealing with an illness that won't allow us to accumulate a couple of years. We have something that's taking us out before we able to experience any kind of change on the level where that we're comfortable in our own skin in. We have moments of delusion, we have moments of avoidance, we have moments of utopia created through self that later causes me more pain. We could get in a long list of that. Anybody? Anybody have a list of things that make you feel good, that make you feel bad? Anybody doing stuff that they don't want to do? And not doing stuff that they do want to do? Kind of interesting, right? We'll get back to that too. Because I can't survive me. I won't make it a couple years. So I need this thing to take place within a few months. Somewhere along the line, this thing's going to happen. Okay, go ahead.
With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource.
Whoa. Underline that. Where's this place thing, inner resource? Have tapped into an unsuspected inner resource. It's like tapping into a keg. Bam! Right? But we're tapping into something else. You know the effort tapping, you ever see somebody tap into a cake? Right? The spout and all that. And we're kind of like doing the same thing, but on a spiritual cake. And we're the cake. We're tapping into something to get a different result. Right? We need to tap into this thing, right? Go ahead.
Inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves.
Underline that, with their own conception of a power greater than yourself. When we look up the word conception, right, it is a plan or an idea or purpose moving in a new direction. New ideas, new purpose, new plan, conception, right? And to bringing that into fruition, into development. It's like when you get a model, you have a bunch of instructions. Or it's a concept, and what you're going to do is you're going to bring it all about by putting it all together. Right? The experience. Right? Go ahead.
Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness.
So you notice this says here, with few exceptions, our members find they have tapped into an unsuspected inner resource of strength, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. So, all of them, or one or two of them?
All of them.
All of them, as the result of a course of action or a sudden spiritual experience. But they talk about here a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than themselves, this awareness, not thought or idea, this awareness. And Rob, you want to look up that word conception if you got a second? We'll kind of get back to this because they use that word a lot. And it's one of those words that are misunderstood, right? And so when we get to this thing is talking about something that's happening deep down within side of us, right? That all our members, which hardly an exception, have tapped into this inner resource. Right? All our members. Right? And they call our more religious members call it a God consciousness. But what they all tapped into was an inner resource. Yes? Is that what they're talking about? It's important. So now let's go back to page, when they talk about here, and we agnostics, they talk about I have to have this experience that creates a change sufficient enough for me to recover. Meaning where I no longer have an alcoholic mind. This problem needs to be removed because as long as it's present, I'm not going to survive me. Right? The doctor talked about that with Bill. He talked about when he observed Bill, he seen he was a man of good earning potential. Yes? But he had this illness that didn't allow him to live the life that he was meant to live. Anybody wondering who you're arguing with all those times you relapsed or couldn't do what you wanted? You were arguing with your illness that had you. Your potential, your high hopes, all the dreams, aspirations weren't able to come to volition, weren't able to stay for any given period of time because this thing would take you out all the time. Anybody have that experience here? And that would make us baffled. So as long as this thing is present, I'm never going to be able to live to my full potential. This thing will weather me down to a point where incomprehensible demoralization. So I know now, as long as I'm afflicted with this illness, I'm not going to survive. Are we kind of, yeah? But now they're offering me a solution that's spiritual in nature. That means if I see those that went before me, it seemed to work in. But now I'm having a conflict with my conception, my understanding of God, because I don't have their understanding yet. I'm struggling with my understanding. I was a true believer, right? So I would think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. I'm a true believer. I'm going to go right to God. But they already talked about that guy. And they're talking about the agnostic here. And they're talking about the atheist. So all three of us have one thing in common. And they're going to tell us that. Most people, when they talk about step 2 or about God, they're talking about their understanding. They're not talking about our understanding. Two different things. So when most people talk about the conversation in a general way in one of the meetings, they're talking about their own conception, and that's not what we're talking about. We want to know what's our understanding. Does that kind of make sense? So if I'm going to experience what they're experiencing, I better understand what they're talking about. Remember when Ebby was talking with Bill? Remember that conversation? Most people miss that they were in conversation for 2 hours. Ebby was talking about his experience and how he obtained it through a course of action that some people presented to him, and he had this profound alteration that Bill was able to see, yes? Yep. 2 months sober, Bill seen that this guy was on fire, right? After that conversation, Bill was still struggling in his own mind with his own conception, yes?
Yep.
His own belief. Would he have been able to achieve what Ebby was experiencing if he would have stuck with his own understanding?
No, absolutely not.
So when we do this in meetings, right, it gets really confusing because what we need to share is our experience with this power that got us to change. Right? Our more religious members call it a God consciousness, but what we realize, it's not our ideas of this thing, it's not how I view this thing that created the change, is the experiencing of this change, of this thing. Does that kind of make sense? Do you have the word concept there?
Yeah, he put it in the chat.
What does it say?
I don't have the chat up.
I got it. Let me just get back to it for a second.
It says the sum of a...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead, John.
A conception, the sum of a person's ideas and beliefs about something, idea, plan, design, or thought.
Idea, plan, or thought. So what we're being given is an idea, a thought, and a plan. Yes?
Yes.
If my idea is interfering with what's being presented, then I need to find a way to navigate through that. So when they were sitting there with Bill, he says, why don't you choose your own conception? And he says, I can go for the czars of the heaven, the creative intelligence, right? He kind of broke it. I could go for these things, but these other things are. And then he broke it down to its simplest form. It was only a matter of willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required. I saw what I might build in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. It's only a matter of being willing to believe. I saw that I might build what I saw in my friend if I did what he did, basically. I'm paraphrasing. Does that kind of make sense? So
Yep.
he's seen that he could have this experience if he believed that the same power his friend accessed, that he could access regardless of what you call it. So he was sold on that idea, not the idea of God, Jesus Christ, all these other things, because they were his stumbling blocks. But he couldn't get past the idea that his friend did experience something, and that he was able to obtain that if he did what his friend did. And that he could have his own experience with this thing. It's only a matter of being willing. That's what we're talking about here. Because if Ebby and Bill would have got in just their concepts and their beliefs, how would we be where we are today? No, Ebby seen that he had to have his own experience, and Bill saw his ideas of miracles were revised right then and there. It wasn't a conversation that we had. How many people get talking about God and religion, start arguing? How many people talk about their ideas in meetings, their beliefs in meetings? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about access to this power that created the change. Came to believe, step 2 says, came to believe that a power could restore us to sanity. Step 2 says, a course of action will bring about these results. So we see in step 1, the confirmation of the idea being presented on the scope of what alcoholism looks like is another drink. How many people's confirmed step 1 here more than a couple times? So there's a group of people that said you could have a different experience with this thing, that you can actually recover from it. This is the course of action we took. Remember the guy on page 42? Then they outline the spiritual program of action after step 1, yes?
Yep.
Then they outline the spiritual answer they found in the program of action by which 100 of them followed. Are we taking that course of action yet?
For at this point, no.
No, so we're getting the understanding of what the problem is. We're getting their understanding what the solution is. We're trying to move past the cheese factory to have an experience, right? So, go ahead.
To one who feels, right there.
Yep.
Okay, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety.
I mean, that malady, right, that centers in the mind, right? Have they talked about a spiritual illness yet?
Nope, absolutely not.
Because our solution is spiritual in nature, right? So it's kind of interesting. They haven't mentioned that as the problem yet, have they? They only mention it as our solution. Okay, go ahead.
To be doomed to an alcoholic death.
Step 1, to be doomed to an alcoholic death, the step 1 experience, where you no longer have viable answers for you. Meaning, I know what the outcome is, I'm going to drink again. I've demonstrated that time and time again. And I know one of these times I'm not going to get up, or I'm not going to come back, or something, right? So I've gotten my own attention. You don't need to convince me. My story has convinced me now. Like the guy says, he says, thanks for letting me know it's not any better out there. Nobody's story has ever stopped me from picking up here. Anybody? My own story hasn't stopped me from drinking. Right? Has anybody's story here ever stopped them from drinking on a continuous basis? No, that's why it's an illness. Otherwise, we'd be that guy given good reason. I was hoping to be that guy given good reason. I'm sure I just didn't find the right reason. Right? One of these reasons is going to work, right? Cut my own hair, puking green bile, right? Unemployable. Getting close. Anytime now, Ma. Okay, go ahead.
Or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face.
But it's our understanding to live on a spiritual basis. We go, oh, what that looks like. I thought to get a haircut, get a tie, join the church again. That's my understanding, right? No nookie before marriage. No. I thought, what an order. I can't go through it. By the time I finished with spiritual principles, there was nothing appealing about what you people were offering, right? Then my sponsor says, hey, come here. I go, what? He says, look at the audience. It can't be that hard. Take a look at what God's dealing with. It can't be that hard. Right? There's hope for me, right? When I look at the people I'm surrounded by, and they seem to be happy, joyous, and free, and I know them. Okay, this seems manageable. And there is Nookie? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, but it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics.
Meaning, not doing this. How do you know you're one of those? How long did it take for you to get into a big book study? that's 11 years, right? I've tried every other method. Anybody here? But we talk about this is how it works. I wonder how it works. Let's bring up a topic. Let's talk about topics. If I could achieve these topics, if I could achieve all these things that we talk about, then I really don't need to do this. This is for you people. I'll talk about like I've done it, but I won't really do it. Anybody here? You listen to every meeting you go to, everybody sounds like they've done it. The only person that doesn't sound like they've done it is the person at their second meeting. Third meeting, they've done it. If you want what I got, here's my phone number. We'll talk over coffee. Go ahead. I'll leave that one right there. Okay, go ahead.
But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else.
Or else what? Welcome back. Welcome back, right? If you're lucky enough to come back.
So perhaps it is going to be that way with you. But cheer up.
I love that. They're funny. Come on, but cheer up, right? It can't be that bad. Look at all these people that seem happy, joyous, and free. They got something. Can't be that difficult. Look at the audience, right? It can't be that difficult. They seem contented, happy. The only one who ever struggles with this thing are the people who haven't done it. Everybody who's done it is kind of why they wonder why it was so difficult. Because they couldn't get past the cheese factory. On the other side is a life they're amazed with. Before they started is a total life of stumbling over their own thinking, thoughts, and emotions. They can't get past themselves. But cheer up. Like, it's really funny that we think this is the worst thing that ever happened to us, and everybody who's done it thinks it's the best thing that ever happened to us. Kind of weird, eh? That kind of... Okay, go ahead.
But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago.
And that's all the stuff we hear in topic meetings, absent of a spiritual experience. So if you've had a spiritual experience living by spiritual principles, then you're talking how you're applying prayer and meditation to these troubled areas to seek guidance with counsel. Outside of that, you're talking about how you are applying you to you, like acceptance, right? Surrender. All these things sound nice, but on this side of the steps, it's a mere code and better philosophy. On the other side of the steps, they mean something totally different because you're having a different experience with these things. And the confusing part is that we think on this side of the steps, we're able to achieve these things, which is another form of self-delusion. Because if there was another way, we would have rewrote the big book by now, wouldn't we have? If there was another way of doing it after 87 years, we're the group of people that come up with it, aren't we?
For sure.
Like, if you want an easier, softer way to get around the system, you go to a noon meeting and talk to us. If there's a way to beat the system, talk to one of us. We know. Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried.
Anybody? How many of you really tried this stuff? Yeah, but we don't click into the idea it's not working because we're not getting past the cheese factory. We're still into the putting it in the drawer. It means letting it go. The ignoring and gaslighting is not a form of longevity, because sooner or later everything comes full circle. How many people's noticed that about life? And these things that we thought we escaped and evaded come around and cripple us. The four horsemen. And we have these things sober. Anybody?
Yep.
Pray to misery and depression. That means we're sitting ducks to it. You ever watch in the Sahara Desert? These things undetected, sitting there, and then these things, the crocodile, the hyenas, they get it. And these things that get us is misery, unhappiness, conflict. We're a prey to these things around us. Why? Because we're undetected. It enters our peripheral, or it enters our consciousness, and when it's surfaced, it has us. Anybody have that experience in life? We're crippled by our own thinking and emotions, and we can't shake it. So what we do is create a diversion, which causes more problems, more agony, more pain. Anybody? It's a vicious circle. Okay, go ahead.
We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there.
The needed power. Lower casing. We're applying self to try to create the psychic change or spiritual experience in the back of the book. We're trying to create the promises without doing the work. I'm trying to stay sober without obtaining the change necessary. I'm trying to do this not understanding that I'm running against the clock here. It's only a matter of time before I drink again. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years. There comes a time my illness is lying dormant. It's not removed. It's lying dormant. There's a difference between being recovered and being abstinent in between drinks. We're all in between drinks. Some of us have a daily reprieve from that fate. When you think about that, right? It's pretty huge. What saves me from the fate of alcohol is the problem's been removed based on the application of these things in my life that give me a daily reprieve. I don't keep me sober. Okay, go ahead.
Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly.
And later it'll talk about, so what we're entering here is the introduction to step 3. It's preparing us for step 3. Because if we see I have this problem, and I'm acutely aware I need this solution, I need to get to a place of being able to make that decision. But if I'm plagued with my own understanding, thoughts, and ideas, it's not my understanding. They didn't say here, okay, we'll go with your understanding now. They're kind of saying here, part of your understanding is the problem here. Because you're not understanding what we're talking about. You're still trying to apply you to you. If a mere code, if these things, if you were able to really experience this thing, not the delusion of it, like we could create euphoria by thinking about something long enough. It doesn't mean it's happening. I call that evangelical sobriety. I created a false sense of something changing when nothing has changed. Anybody? What that means is, how many people's got a number from a girl or a guy here and you got all excited about it? You started thinking what that relationship would look like. You don't even know if it's the correct number, but you're all, wow, this is going to be great. Or the idea of a new job, or the idea of a new car, the idea of winning the lottery, the idea, right? Going on that hot date. All the signs are looking good. But you haven't phoned yet. But, creating euphoria. We do the same thing in recovery. Anybody do that here? And then something comes along, broken shoelace, bill, creditor, someone brings up your past, then you lose your shit. Then you George Stadzik's running now. As the cat goes through the screen door, I'm gonna kill somebody. And then you go to the meeting. I like if you want what I got. Okay, go ahead.
Lack of power.
Lack of power. Yes, to create the change necessary in order to recover from this thing that's kicking my ass. What's kicking my ass is alcoholism. As long as it's present, I ain't going nowhere. I create the delusion of change. I build a bright life up for myself. Anybody? Things are looking then pull it down by a senseless breeze. How many people's done that here? How many people around us are not as excited about our sobriety as we are anymore? Yeah, we know. Yeah, I know. Anytime now, yeah, we know. You got a 20? You got a 20? No, go ahead. Lack of power, right?
That was our dilemma.
Not some of our dilemma. It's a dilemma, isn't it? How do I create this change? Look what I've been doing. Look how hard I've been working. This always happens to me. Look what I'm doing. It's a dilemma. Why isn't it working? Because I'm missing a certain element here. I believe in God. I believe in this. I've reformulated God. It's a tree. It's a riverbank. It's a doorknob. It's a light bulb. It didn't ask me to do that, has it? Has it asked me to establish my understanding of God here? Anywhere? Not yet, has it? Because it needs to explain what it is that they're talking about. So they're saying lack of power to create this change. What change? Necessary. And all my efforts and ideas has led to the same thing. I haven't been able to experience this change that these people that went before me talked about, and what they talked about in the spiritual appendix, what the doctor talked about, what Bill talked about, what they talked about, and there is a solution, what they talked about more about alcohol. I haven't been able to create this change on the level that they're talking about. A part of me knows that. Right? I got my own attention here. Right? So I need this thing. So it's a dilemma. We had to
find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously.
Longest sentence in the book. Obviously, to everybody, including you now. Right? Because how many years have some of us been working on changing ourselves? How many people's had the cheering committee and rah, 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 and the people just getting quieter? Yeah, we know. They wait to do the sniff test every time they see you. Give me a hug. Yeah, okay, they seem all right today. Just hide the wallet, Mom. Grandma, put your teeth away. Okay, but...
But where and how are we to find this power?
That's a good question. And if you listen at meetings, they bring up the solution, and everybody starts talking about their own ideas, yes? Come on. I just went to a meeting today. They were talking about God and step 2, which is step 2, right? Everybody start talking about their own ideas. Step 2 is not your idea of God. Otherwise, they would have said that in step 2. Just go with your own conception. They haven't said that yet, have they? So what they're saying is we establish lack of power as our dilemma, right? We establish I can't create the change necessary to recover. So the question is now, where and how was I to find this power? So a lot of people think that question mark is for you to stop and ask yourself, where would I find God? And so what we do as newcomers and people who don't understand or people who haven't been explained this thing is, I think I'm on a quest for God now. So I stop reading and I need to go find God in step 2. How many people's heard that? Because most people, when they talk about step 2, they talk about their relationship with God. That's not step 2. Right? So, I got to go find God. So, I'm a true believer. Right? I just can't stay sober. So, I know where to find God. I know where God is. I go back to the Baptist church. I get it all going on. Things are great. And then I get loaded again. I got the haircut. I got the Bible. I'm looking at Bible code. I can't. Why? I'm feeling different. I'm thinking different. I'm not even thinking about drinking. I'm drinking again. I must be at the wrong church with the wrong God. So I go to the Nazarene church. Happens again. So then I go to the businessman, which is the evangelical. I go evangelical, talking in tongues. Things are happening. It's serious stuff. And you know what? I'm talking in tongues drunk. Right? It's a different language, but no one is understanding me, right? I'm doing baptisms, the whole thing, it's real pathetic to watch, but it's me and God, right? And then I'm angry at God because now I don't think he believes in me. Why? Because I'm not getting sober. I don't know if anybody is that type here. I'm reeking of alcohol. I'm in pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, begging God to help me. but I can't seem to make that connection. So what they say here is, well, I need to keep reading. Anytime there's a question mark, I need to keep reading. They explain it. It doesn't mean for me to stop and start thinking about it. It's like when we go to these discussion meetings. Anybody been to a discussion? They read a bit, they close the book, and everybody starts talking about what they think it says. Why don't you read what it says and expand on that? Whoa, that's deep. Whoa. I mean, actually talk about what it says in the book? What an order. I can't go through with it. Yes, talk about what it says in the book. Right? Because if you don't understand the one statement, you need to read the statement leading into it. Yes?
Yep.
And then the statements that follow it, and they'll give you an understanding what we're reading about. It's like when we read about the main problem of the alcoholic on page 23. Then they describe the malady. But if you just read the one part with the malady in it, you'd start interpreting, oh, they must mean a spiritual malady, right? Or blah, blah. But you need to read the leading paragraphs into the statement. And the leading paragraphs after that is the example of what they're talking about. Yes? So they're talking about lack of power is my dilemma. If a mere code, so it built the case here. So it says, well, right? So read that again. Lack of power.
Lack of power. That was our dilemma.
Yeah, do we all agree? Do we all agree? Yeah, because I know I need to have this thing now, right? So I've done step one. I've concluded I'm on a life and death errand here, right? And I'm struggling with my ideas about this thing. Because I don't know what their ideas are yet. I'm struggling with my ideas, my conceptions, my understanding, the stumbling blocks within myself. So I need to put this aside, old ideas. I need to put it aside and see what you're saying. What are they saying here? So let's see what they're saying. Yes, lack of power was our dilemma.
We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves.
True. Yes, I get that now, right? Because all these people that went before me is an example of this thing. Like when Bill was sitting with Ebby, his ideas of miracles were revised right then and there. All these people that went before me said they've had this change, and this change is possible for me. But if you want what we have and are willing, what we have, not what I have, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. We're getting you prepared for that. But as long as you're stumbling within your own mind and don't understand what we're talking about, you won't experience what we've experienced. Does that kind of make sense? It's pretty cool, this part of the book. I get kind of fired up a bit. Okay, no baptisms happening today. But go ahead. We're getting close. Go ahead.
Where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about.
Whoa. Oh my God. I was listening to emotional damage. No, this guy is like, what? Snap? That's what this book is about. Oh my God. That's what this book is about? Read that again slowly.
Well, that's exactly what this book is about.
Oh, that's good. Now I know what this book is about. I had no idea that this was about finding this power. Wow. Better keep on reading. Go ahead.
Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem.
Damn. That means if I just do what they did, I'll get what they got. That's too simple. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths, then you're ready to take certain steps. That means I don't divert from the book. I don't divert from their understanding. I continue. They've set the stage, right? Well, where and how were we to find this power? That's what this book is about. His main object is to enable you to find a power greater, which will help you solve your problem, right? That's what we read, right? No, that's not what we read. Half of you went, no, that's not what we read at all. Tricky bastard. Let's read it again slowly. You might want to underline this. I like the part of helping me because I like to take some credit. Yes, you took the credit of ruining your life. That was your job. Our job is to help you put it back together. How good of a job did you do? Someone coming in hot, baby. Coming in hot, right? Still smoking. Woo! Look at that one. Nice. You ever get to see the applause we give some people? It's like, oh, you come to our group, we fight over those ones. Look at this one. They're still mumbling a bit. I got that one. Okay, go ahead.
drooling a bit's the best. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem.
You don't solve your problem. What's this problem? Alcoholism. This illness that has you. You don't have it. You already agreed it's beyond your pay grade. I need something that will remove this thing. I need something to take this debt that I can't seem to shake. Right? So as this was explained to me, and it made sense to me, right? I kind of went, holy shit, my brain's got a contract out of my ass. I need witness protection. My sponsor says, yes, I need witness protection for me. I've been trying to kill me for years. I need to go into witness protection. And if you kind of see that, but first I got to wrap myself up, then I got to get a handler, and then I need a new identity. And then I need to check in with my handler on a daily basis so I don't go back to the old transformation, which will see me dead. Oh, a daily reprieve. I like that. It makes sense. That was my conception of what was being said here. I got that. So, lack of power is our dilemma. Where and how were we to find this power? That's what this book is about, right? So from here forward is getting me prepared to make that decision. It's going to help me navigate through my thinking by looking at things a little differently based on their experience. So there's going to be 3 types of people here that they're going to be talking to: the true believer, the atheist, and the agnostic. All 3 people have the same problem: lack of power. The experience with this power. That is my dilemma. The experience, not knowledge. I guess sit with the best of them. You want to talk about biblical, God, and all that other stuff? We can do that. A lot of us really like getting into God. Anybody? The best thing I ever heard was this person says, you want to talk about God? Okay, but first let's talk about this. You got a goat, you got a horse, and you got a cow. All 3 of them eat grass, yes? But the horse has these big clumps when they digest their food. And the goat has these little pebbles. And the cows have these big patties. Why is that? I don't know. So you don't know shit about shit, but yet you want to talk about God. So that kind of made sense to me. It kind of opened my mind of that place of knowing. Right? That's why we read the set-aside prayer. It's not to forget that you know. It's to build on it. Is to be open to the idea. Maybe I'll see things a little differently. So the homework this week is read through this and find out what the bare minimum is to start this thing. And if you read through it far enough, where you're gonna read is the starting point to this thing. What do you mean by the starting point? Is this. When you hook up a GPS, yes? You sit in your car, you punch in the coordinates, right? We'll say spiritual experience, right? What's the second thing your GPS is going to do is see where you're at. Does that kind of make sense? So what we're going to hook up in our lives is God's prayer system. It's going to be a navigational system that we're going to incorporate with our lives to give us navigation from here forward so we can continue to tap into that power and seek guidance and counsel and direction. And hopefully we get to a point with the development of this thing. It's I call it a spiritual apprenticeship course, right? Is somewhere along the line we'll come to trust this guidance system that we'll be so in tune with it that when we get off course, it'll say recalculating, because we never give up our will and we never take it back. It's just that we don't have the directions necessary or the power necessary to move in the direction we want. Our greatest gift has been our will and what we do with it. It's the proper use of will that we'll find later. That's why it says the care of your survival. Does that kind of make sense? You need to participate in your own life if you're going to get this thing. Once you participate in the getting of this thing, we're left to our own demise. So this part of the book is really interesting because it's kind of like what Ebby did with Bill. We kind of navigate through our own thinking to see what's being said and to see what's being presented, right? to sidestepping our ideas of what this is and seeing what's presented here. So this first part is finding a way for you to navigate through your thinking so you can participate in the course of action necessary to have this spiritual experience, because our lives depend on it. And most of us already know that our thinking is our biggest handicap. It has caused us more problems than probably alcoholism, right? It causes us all the problems in the world. That's why when they talk about this change, they talk about a psychic change. What does it change? In attitude and outlook, how I view the world, how I respond to the world, and how the world in turn affects me, right? And so when they start this thing, we kind of looked at in great detail. We know what our dilemma is, right? On page 45, lack of power, right? And just to highlight that again, right? And where and how were we to find this power, right? Well, that's what this book is about. So if I'm willing to go through this course of action as laid out by those who went before me, I'll have the same experiences as those who put this together, right? We kind of talked about that, right? So I don't have to go and do any investigating. I don't have to go look for this thing, because that's what this thing is about. His main object is to enable me to find a power greater than myself which will solve my problem. This is where I don't put the book down and then go out on a quest, right? Like, it's like I'm not going to go walk in the desert, go find Gandhi and sit in But if you want to do that, that's okay too. So they're going to get across what they're talking about. So as we started going through this, on page 46, you guys were supposed to read through this and see the bare minimum of this. So they talk about here, and you're going to look up that word conception again. Do you have it handy? Right? Rob, why don't you tell us what conception means? And that way we kind of know moving forward, every time they use the word conception, what they're referring to. Not our, right? Because a lot of us think we know what things mean. Or John, you got it there?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, the Big Book Dictionary says the sum of a person's ideas and beliefs about something, or it says, where are we going? What exists in the mind as a representation or as a formulation as of a plan.
So the formulating of a plan, what do you got? We'll hit the dictionary, we'll double check the facts here. What do you got, Rob?
Yeah, what John has, but also the forming or devising of a plan or idea.
So what's step 2? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restrict the formulating of a plan and an idea, yes? Yep. So ours has never been sufficient enough to create the change that we're looking for, and we already understand that, because if a mere code or better philosophy of life was sufficient, a lot of us would have changed our lives a long time ago. So we know we're dealing with an illness. So, much to our relief, page 46.
Page 46. Last paragraph at the bottom of the page there. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him.
So there you go, a contact, right? Getting access to this power. Lack of power is our dilemma. So at this stage of the game, I redefined my understanding as there was a frequency that I could tap into, right? The guys who I sobered up with, they talked about, well, like a radio in your car has everything necessary to connect to the station, right? The transmitter to connect to your station. So it's about tuning it, right? It's something that's already there. It's secondary, the name of the unit in my car. Pioneer, Alpine, right? JBL. Like, most of us get stuck on that idea. But can you connect to the service, right? And a lot of us have the connection where we pay for the satellite connection. So I have that in my car, and all they do is flip a switch and they connect me to it. Does that kind of make sense? Anybody have what's that called? Siri or whatever, Sirius FM or whatever. We all have it, but we don't really know how it works. If you kind of went through all the mechanics, all you know is when you turn on your car, you turn it on, and if you paid for the subscription, you have access to this thing, right? And then it's your job to tune it to the way you like it, or to the way it suits you best. And that's kind of like these principles. Can I get connected to this thing that seems really, really extraordinary? You mean continuous music with no commercials? Wow, right? And that's kind of like a life beyond anything you could ever imagine. Well, so we already see that the people who went before us already set the stage what this looks like. We've already read through it and all that other stuff, so go ahead.
As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence...
So hold it. You're going to slow down. We're going to slow it down. As soon as we admitted the possible, right, existence of a creative intelligence. So the bare minimum is, they're trying to help me to move past my not that we're narrow-minded and not open to suggestions. I'm not suggesting that we're like that at all, hard-headed and open-minded. I know we're not of that type, right? So, and we have an opinion on everything, don't we? So they're saying, can I put that all aside and see what's being said in order to make my beginning on this thing? Can I get to a place that Bill was sitting with Ebby, that it was only a matter of being willing, right? Nothing more was required, that I might build what I saw in my friend. I need to get to that same place psychologically. Doesn't mean I've experienced this, but I'm open to it. Does that kind of make sense? Maybe one or two. Anybody here ever had somebody mad at you where they didn't want to talk to you? Anybody ever experienced that here? Or you have ever been mad at anybody where you didn't want to talk to them, want nothing to do with them? What's the first thing we need to get them to do, or they need to get us to do, is to be willing. Just give me a second, right? And then as soon as they go, okay, you got a second, they're willing, but they're on guard, aren't they?
Yeah.
Right? And then where you go with, and that's kind of like here, like, okay, like, you know what? I have all my own ideas, but they're not working, right? And I need to access this power. And you guys said if I do what you did, I'd get this thing. Okay, so I'm open to the possibility of it. Come on, like, you know, that there might be something greater than me. I know it's hard to believe, right? That there might be something greater than you out there, right? Whoa, that's kind of deep, right? Okay, go ahead.
So as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction.
So the idea, it opens you up to the possibility that I can get this. Is that not going to make you feel good, that there's hope for me, that I don't have to live the same way I'm living anymore? That I might be able to have a different story? Come on, that's got to make it. Yeah, so that's what they're kind of, and you notice it was secondary with the creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. The bottom line is, as we go through this, their collective understanding is lack of power is our dilemma, yes? And what the solution is getting access and having an experience with this power to create a change. An experience. But I need to be open to the idea of starting this process in order to have this experience. Most of us want to have the experience without doing the process. I know nobody like this in this group. Right.
Easier, softer ways.
Yeah, we go home after a meeting. I think I got connection with God. It's happened. Thank God. I thought I nearly had to do the steps. Like, we talk ourselves out of the steps over and over and over. Nobody like that here, right? How many people said, oh, boy, that was close. I nearly had to do the work, but I don't need to because I have this profound relationship now. Anybody? You just got the phone numbers, right? She don't even know your name yet. Okay, go ahead.
Provided we took other simple steps.
So there's the qualifier. I'm open to the idea, and I can have it provided we take other steps, right? Anybody underline that in their book as the homework this week? It was interesting, right? So then over on the other page, we read through this, we're going to hit some highlights here. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question.
So on page 47, middle of the page.
And who's talking there? They are, right? They're talking about their struggles with this whole thing. And if you're like us, you're going to have, somewhere in here, you're going to have the same mindset or struggles. So this chapter kind of hits everybody. It hits the atheist, it hits the true believer, and the agnostic, right? Of where do I make my beginning to go through this? Because I can't continue with my thinking because lack of power has been my dilemma, right? I need a different experience than the one I've been having. Go ahead.
We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there's a power greater than myself?
Even willing to believe. Like, how much more, really? You know what I mean? Really. Do I believe, or am I willing to believe? So here you got a person, yeah, I'm willing to believe, and you got somebody that's open to the idea that there might be. Both of them are starting from the same place. Kind of weird, right?
Yep.
Isn't it? And a true believer I have no problem. Like me, I was like a lot of you heard me, I have no problem believing. Right? I always believe. I was one of those guys reeking of alcohol, right? And evangelical church, Baptist, Nazarene. I've always been, based on my background, my life, I have no problem with the idea of God. But I was of the type that I didn't believe God believed in me. Right? Again, my thinking causing stumbling blocks in the pursuit of this thing, right? But when I was open to the idea that I might get access to this thing, that sidestepped all that thinking, all that doctrine, and all that teaching to have a new experience, because that's what I was in need of, a new experience. Not a new idea with this thing, a new experience. I needed to experience this thing. Go ahead.
As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built.
And when I asked my son, I said, what are you talking about? He says, we're walking in a different energy field. We're walking a different, like anybody ever suffer from depression here or overthinking?
Overthinking?
You ever notice what happens to your energy? It gets dark. The more you think, the more you got to get in a horizontal position and lie down and like you're self-defeated into a place where you're not even motivated, crippled by your own thinking. Anybody ever experienced that here?
Oh, yeah.
It's like walking into the dark matter. Anybody have that? And a lot of us spend a lot of time in the dark matter, right? But when anybody ever feel electrified here, just energy, and it changes your whole perspective, outlook, and everything, just moments of wow. You ever notice your energy? You're in a different energy field, and that's what my sponsor taught me, right? We're gonna walk into a different field, right? Energy, power, right? We're gonna connect the light bulb to the socket, and we're gonna have a different experience in the room I'm sitting in. Before I was sitting in a room with no power. But once the power got there, it's a whole different experience, and that's what they're getting at here, right? So, as we go through here, we start reading, and they talk about on page 50, a summary of what they're getting at, and in this new, trying to get a new perspective, we're being open to the idea of moving past the cheese factory, right, in my own thinking, right, moving past the stumbling block, moving past me, into a different idea in our personal stories.
Second paragraph, page 50. In our personal stories, you'll find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself.
So the basis is this power and access and the experience with it, yes?
Yep.
That created a change. Remember when we read the spiritual appendix? It says all our members, with few exceptions, have tapped into an inner resource of strength, right? A collective experience, yes? So that's what they're kind of talking. All of them have the same basis, but how they translate that or how they explain that might be different for each one of us, but the basis of it is the same. Like when I talk about the stereo in my truck and you talk about the stereo in your car or you talk about the stereo in your home, they're all functioning the same. And then I go, well, my stereo cost me $6,000 for my truck. And then you laugh and say, my stereo came with the truck. No, go ahead.
Okay, so whether we agree with the particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Everything has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself.
And that's kind of true. Like, the best way I've ever heard that explained is if you had different cultures, different people from all areas of the globe, right, sitting at a round table, and then they started talking about relationships, right? Depending on where you're raised in your culture, that could turn really, especially if you had I might be politically incorrect, right? You had a lesbian couple, a gay couple, and then you had two people that weren't married, and one guy that was single, one girl that was single, didn't believe in relationships, and then a married couple, and they all sat around the table and explained their idea of relationships. How well do you think that conversation would go? And you had a Baptist minister there, like, you know what I mean? You had all these people, right? Some countries, like, they're still putting people to death for their belief and all that other stuff, right? So you imagine sitting at that table, what it would look like. It would look like, hell would break loose pretty fast, wouldn't it? But if everybody talked about what the basis of the relationship was, do you think it would be a different conversation?
Totally different.
Right? And that's what they're kind of saying here. So it's secondary. The main part is you got access to this power that created the change, and you're trying to explain it in a way that it makes sense to all of us. So that means it's kind of, go ahead, and it kind of goes into that. Go ahead.
On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself.
That's the basis, right? That's the basis to this whole thing. What you call it a second. So when I sit in a meeting and I talk about I got access to this power, that's what this whole thing was about through a course of action that created this change, right? Is that more all-inclusive? Is that all-inclusive?
That sounds all-inclusive.
Yeah, but if I started talking about my belief system today, 33 years sober, that I'm a Christian and I have a strong belief in Jesus Christ, and how do you think that's going over in a meeting? So that's my own personal thing. That if you asked me, I'd share that with you. But you see the difference. Some of you just sat back in your chair and thought, "Oh no, I'm in trouble here." Like so the mind kind of went, right? But what got me here, right, to where I'm comfortable with in my belief, right, is the basis of this thing. So the members who went before me didn't rob me of their belief system, like rob me by explaining their belief system. What they allowed me to do was get the understanding of getting access to this power so I could have my own experience. Does that kind of make sense? Is that kind of cool? And that's why they spent so much time putting this together, right, in the way they did with the people who influenced the wording. They influenced the how this was kind of put together, right? So it'd be all-inclusive, not exclusive. Go ahead.
This power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible.
The psychic change your spiritual experience. Yes? This recipe has been happening for 87 years. The beginning of it was the witnessing of the doctor. The witnessing of this thing that gave it credibility. It says there was something here. It kind of blew him away a bit, that what was happening here, where he allowed our type of people to work with other people in his facility who were of this type, which is pretty profound. And they haven't changed the recipe in 87 years. The only thing that needs to be redone in the book is reread. Nothing else needs to be, just needs to be reread. Right? Okay, go ahead.
As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking.
That's what we're doing here. We're taking a certain attitude, right? And we're going to do certain things. There's been a revolutionary change in that. So it's pretty wild, provided they took other things. So you see they've mentioned that twice now? Because they know you're going to be feeling better and think you don't need to do this. Right? A lot of us confuse feeling better for getting better. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. This is a point of taking a new... read that again.
Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power.
And that's what we're doing now, are we not? Trying to get a certain attitude of being willing to believe. Willing, I mean, to have an experience or this power, right? So it's not my ideas and belief system. Do I have an experience with this thing? Do I have access to this power that creates the change? Because you could have all the theory in the world. Remember that other case? The guy thought he was a good churchman? Remember? Like, I was one of those guys. I know the Bible pretty good. And you want to talk about spirituality and spiritual experiences and different things? We can spend all day. But, have you had the necessary experience in order to recover in the longevity that this thing provides? No. But I will argue these things. I got this guy who can't get sober. And he argues his thinking. And then I said, well, how well is that working for you so far? And it took him a second to understand that his thinking is what's defeating him, and he can't get past it. And unless we get past those things in our thinking to create a path to move out of, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to create a path here. It's like when I learned how to... When you drive a motorcycle, they teach you where you look is where you go. Meaning, if I'm coming up to a car wreck or an accident and I'm looking at the accident, where am I going?
Right into it.
I'm going right into it. So through the course, I took a defensive driving course, and what they said is you got to pick a path. And all you got to do is look at the path and your bike will follow.
Look where you want to go.
Look where you want to go. And I could sit here and talk next week, episode after episode, have that a same. And that's what they're trying to say here is stop looking at the wreck, stop looking at your ideas, stop looking at everything you think you know, and can you pick a path? Can you pick a path that will lead you to experience what we're experiencing? Right? Because you do believe what we tell you to be true, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be continually reading. If you thought it was all a lie, you wouldn't be. So you do believe there is something available for you here. You do believe there's a different experience for you here. Is the obtaining of it. Right? This experience of it. Go ahead.
Okay. We'll read that again. There's the beginning. To do certain simple things, that there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, and happiness, and a sense of direction flowed into them.
That doesn't sound too bad, eh? How many people like some of that? Big slice or a small slice?
Give me the whole thing.
I don't need to be on a diet with this, though. I'll take a big slice. And anybody that don't want this, sure, I'll take it. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Okay, go ahead.
So this happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements.
Again, to go through with it. This is preparing us to get us to the stage of moving through this thing to obtain the experience. Again, provided. Right? Because sometimes when we have that thought of the idea, it's like being in a lifeboat out at sea for 2 or 3 days, and you think all is lost. And then all of a sudden you see a ship in the horizon. It's going to make you feel really good, right? But you're not in the boat yet. You're still in the light. You're still in the dinghy. You got to get in the light. You got to get in the main vessel. Go ahead.
Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory.
Anybody? Hey, once you stop drinking, life happens, right? Anybody notice the human condition? How plagued we are with our thinking and our emotions and the bewilderments, right? So we see that, you notice that they haven't been talking about alcohol at all, have they? They stopped talking about it on page 44. Now they're talking about the struggles that we have, right, as human beings in regards to our thought pattern, our ideas, and our belief system, and how rigid we are, and how we'll stick to certain ideas even if it means our own demise. And it's kind of scary, but we don't hold a monopoly on that thinking. But for us, it would mean, right? It means our doom, right? So we had to be in a different position. Some people can live with those thoughts and ideas for the rest of their life and not be, who cares? But for us, to find a spiritual way of living, or else, right? Something's got our attention. What got our attention is this illness. And unless I have this experience that they talk about in step 12, I'm going to be doomed to an alcoholic death as they described in step 1. Step 2 is the idea that I can have this experience. What's the confirmation of step 2? Is step 12. Step 2 is the course of action that I need to engage in to have this experience. So I make the decision to follow 3 and 3, which leads us into there, and go through that course of action to have this experience. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Where did I get that idea, that possibility? Is in step 2. Yes? With the spiritual appendix in the back. Okay, go ahead.
They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith.
Not their idea of God. The consciousness, the experience, the tapping into this power, this thing that guides them, this intuitiveness that we all had at different times in our life. Anybody have that voice deep down within try to get your attention? Right? And you say, what? It's there every now and then. It always has been there, but we ignored it. Right? It's the life force that we're all connected to. Right? It's pretty interesting stuff. Go ahead.
This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than all the millenniums which went before it.
And why is that? Because they changed the way they look at things and their belief system. They believe certain things to be true, where before they would hang you for such thoughts. They'd actually hang people for thinking outside the box or put you in jail, right? So it's kind of, when you think of how long we've been on the earth, it's only in the last 100 years we've made this progress. Could you imagine they'd actually execute people who thought the earth, when they started saying, maybe the earth is round? Okay. Oh, I got another one for the fire, Pete. No, so on the next page, 52. We had to ask ourselves.
Okay, middle of the page. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view.
Ready? You notice it didn't say to our alcoholism. We don't treat alcoholism. We have a solution for it. We don't treat it. What we're treating is our human condition. That's what alcohol used to treat, was our human condition, yes?
Yep.
The promises used to come true when I drank. And then the nightmare began somewhere along the line. Bewilderment, frustration, and totally. So we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. So that means in order to change our point of view, we have 2 points of view. We have 2 ways of looking at something, yes? Our way and the way it's being presented, or a different way, or a different solution presented by somebody else. Hey, did you look at this way? Oh, wow. So I now have 2 ways of looking. When we give people advice, when we parent people, the child has one way of looking at it and they can't seem to get past it. You sit down, you comfort them, and you talk to them about developing a different idea or a different practice. Yes? And they're able to go back and face school, face those or face life. You give them the ability to stand up within themselves to go face life. Yes? So they have 2 points of view, and they struggle with their own ideas. Anybody? But they're more believing the new idea being presented than the old one that's still trying to cripple them. Pretty cool stuff when you think about it, right? So why shouldn't we apply to our human the same readiness to change our point of view? Because a lot of us are really, we're very open-minded as long as everybody's agreeing with us. You ever notice that? You want to see a meeting go crazy, you start talking different in there. Huh? Or have your cell phone go off and it's like, another one for the fire. No. Go ahead.
Okay, we were having trouble with personal relationships.
Nobody here, right?
Never, no.
See, this isn't alcohol. This is the human condition. There's a lot of people out there that have problems with personal relationships. Anybody? Yeah. Okay.
We couldn't control our emotional natures.
Anybody know a lot of normies like that? It's not just, oh, I was an alcoholic before I drank. How do you know? Oh, because I had problems with relationships. No, you were a problem individual. You had humanism going on that was looking for a drink to solve. Right? You took a drink somewhere along the line. It's like, holy shit, this problem went away. Right? It's kind of like, anybody? Yeah, and then somewhere along the line, they started compounding it, right? So, there we go.
We were prey to misery and depression.
Prey to misery and depression. When you think about that, you're walking along and you're a prey. You're the gazelle in Africa or whatever, Serengeti, and all the prey is waiting for you. You're unattended. You're walking alone. Right? And what are the things instead of the hyenas, lions, right, is misery and depression. We're a prey to these things. When they found them, they locked in on us. Anybody? And you couldn't shake it, right? You can't shake it. It seems to cripple you, right? And so what we need is a diversion or another drink, because we can only stay in that state so long before the insanity returns. How many people here has gotten to such a state of craziness that they didn't care what happened to them? They needed a drink. Right? But 2 days ago, you were so happy, joyous, and free. Yeah, but then I showed up. Not me, personally. You showed up. A lot of people, yeah, you showed up. I was doing fine until I started listening to you. You're right, you are my problem. No, go ahead. So, remember a sponsor, the guy, he had a sticker and he gave it to me and he says, go home and put this on your mirror, right? And it says, you are now looking at the problem. So I thought, yeah, I went home and put it on my wife's mirror. I mean, I didn't do that. I'm a lot smarter than I look.
You would put on your glasses.
What's that?
Okay, we couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was.
And that's what it kind of translates to is when you're kind of not solution oriented. How many people sit in a meeting trying to figure out how they're going to solve the problem that they created? Right? And what I like, my sponsor said, why don't you pray about it? And I would think, I don't know how God's going to take care of this thing. I thought about it all week. Anyway, I'm going to pray about it. I'm trying to think how God's going to fix this thing. Anybody ever do that here, or just me? Am I the only genius that recognize? Yeah, so that's in a whole state within itself, right? So go ahead.
When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did.
Underline that. Right? And I heard, like, a lot of times when I'm in meetings, I meditate on things that I hear, and it says, your thinking got you here. Remember, your thinking got you here. But really, it's not my thinking that got me here. What got me here was the lack of solution to a problem that was eating my lunch, that was causing me. What a gift to be able to end up here. It was an act of providence. I didn't think, oh, what a great idea to come to AA. It wasn't there was no other place for me to go. I mean, if Burger King was solving this thing, open 24 hours a day, I'd just go in there and get a side order of fries, do drive-through recovery. Oh, I've done that. I have an order of serenity with a little bit of acceptance. I'll come back tomorrow from letting it go, and a turnover. I might as well get a turnover. And I'll have an acceptance hamburger, please. Hold the onions. And that's how I used to treat sobriety. Go to a meeting, drive through, take what you want, leave what you want, not understanding any of this. Okay, go ahead. But the God idea did. So here's the setup to this page. This is really cool. So here they're talking about logic on page 53.
At the top of the page.
Yeah.
Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions.
That's what we're doing here. Right? So you got to be open to what's being said. We've already diagnosed ourselves that we're an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, beyond human aid. I need this thing, right? So I heard what alcoholism was. I as the template, I put my life up again and say, yes, I have this thing, or it has me. Okay, I need the solution. The way you guys presented it, the way it's demonstrated in the people around me, it doesn't look like that difficult, but it looks pretty spectacular. Because I'd like my life to look like that compared to the way my life looks. In general, do you want what we have? Meaning the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. Do you want the story of Alcoholics Anonymous? So it's not, so it wasn't like, oh yeah, I want what Chuck has or Bob or Tom. It was collectively, do I want this experience that's available to me? Because what we become representatives of is the story or the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, what it does for people like us. Pretty cool, right? Go ahead.
That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We, agnostically inclined, would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said we don't know. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
So here's the interesting part. Most people think we need to answer that question. That's the way we think. They're not asking us that question here. You hear people say it all the time. Well, what's our choice to be? They're not going to do a bait and switch here. Because just earlier they're saying, all I need to do is be willing to believe. Now all of a sudden, a couple pages later, well, you can make up your mind yet? No, it's not. It's not like that, right? It's this thought of logic and reason. So we're getting to that place. Well, either we think it's black or white, right? Is or isn't, right? And that's where most of us ever get to. They're saying, when there's a question mark, who explains what they're talking about or asking?
They do.
They do. So we need to keep on reading to see in what regards are they talking about. So they're going to clarify that. Go ahead. Arrived
at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support.
So they're setting us up. So we're using reason here, right? And it's not black or white. So we're using reason. They're asking us to continue, but it hasn't brought about the necessary experience that we need in order to recover, right? Because lack of power is our dilemma. So reason brought us so far, that meaning here we are, but it's not enough. Does that kind of make sense? But we're gonna utilize this thing, our ability to assess, the ability to look at things, to weigh information. So let's see. That was natural.
That was natural, but let us think a little more closely.
So ready? So let's look at it a little more closely. Not the black and white, but the idea that you've actually been doing this all along, but it hasn't been working toward your betterment because you're lacking the power. So imagine if you're able to tap into a power and still being able to assess things correctly and to move in a direction and have the power and the experience to bring this thing about. Does that kind of make sense? right? Because we've been trying all our effort to get this thing, but we can't seem to get it because lack of power is our dilemma. So we're using reason, we're using our efforts, we're using our belief, we're utilizing all. That's the conversation we're moving into here, right? Go ahead.
Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith.
True. Why did we come here? Because we heard there might be something here. Maybe there was no one left to go. Maybe it was enough. We used reason to come to our first meeting. Or maybe we had an alternative. Go to jail, go to a meeting. Something, we weighed the evidence and said, you know what? I'm going to go there. Anybody? Get people off my back. But we made a decision to come here, right? Or maybe some of you got conned here. You came here to help your friend. But you didn't have a problem, but your friend brought you for support. At 6 years sober, they were 6 years sober and needed some support. Go ahead. Find that funny later. Go ahead.
For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith?
True.
Yep.
So when I do this, when I go to the store, I have certain faith that there's going to be things there. When I go to work, I'm having faith that I'll get paid and I'll be able to acquire this. So we're building ideas and then we act on it for the result that we're hoping for. Right? Are we not doing that already?
Yep.
Pretty interesting, right? Okay.
Yes, we've been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So, in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time.
Oh, yeah. But with alcoholism involved, we're getting taken out all the time, so we can't really enjoy the fruits of our labor, or whatever you want to say, like our lives. We pull the structure down by countless sense of sprees. Anybody here? Okay, go ahead. We
found, too, that we had been worshippers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on.
Okay, so, hold on. Worshiper, what do you mean worshipers? Where we spend our energy is a form of worship. Anybody overthink relationships that you're not in but you're hoping to be in? Anybody think about people that didn't know you were even thinking about them? And you're building a relationship with them? Or a job, anybody go for a job interview? Oh, when I get this job, I'm going to get this. When I get this paycheck, that paycheck. Spend a lot of thought and ideas, energy, where we spend our energy. Anybody spend a lot of energy today on things outside of themselves to bring about an idea of hope, the idea of something different? Is that not a form of worship as soon as I have? Oh, interesting, right? So we're already doing this, a form of worship, right? Go ahead.
Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves?
Mostly ourselves, but I mean, how you can benefit me. Yeah. Oh my God, go ahead.
And then, with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or the flower?
So that's interesting. So you notice that something happening here is that these things are creating an emotional shift within inside of you. Anybody real? When you think about the possibility of real, how many people get a little warmed up about the idea? How many people have gone through photo albums here? Remember my mom, when I go to my mom, she brings out these buckets of pictures. That was not, you know what I mean? Not like the iPhone don't come out, like pictures. And we start going, anybody ever do that exercise?
Oh, yeah.
And every time I go there, it's like, here, okay, let's prepare a dinner and the pictures. And when we go through the pictures, I'm not too sure how they unfold, but as she pulls them out, you look at them and they'll bring you back to a memory. Either a good memory and it kind of makes you feel good, or a memory that kind of tightens you up a bit, right? Or another memory that kind of gives you a bit of regret, or another memory makes you happy. See how this emotional manipulation happens based on your senses? And it happens in here? When we bottomed out, most people don't go, oh my God, it is, they buckled over from their spirit inside of them to feel like somebody's pulling a barbed wire through their soul. Anybody ever feel that? Got snot running under your nose, you're buckled over, your spirit is crippled. And it's trying to break free from the entrapment you have it in, but it can't. right? And then hope comes with the idea that somebody phones or something happens that has you moving in a different direction. Or maybe I'll phone this person, or somebody just happened to phone me at that minute. Something happened that has you sitting here today. When you think about that, it's pretty wild. Where a lot of people never have that opportunity, right? Who are in a consistent state of the state that you're free of today, that they won't have the opportunity to be in. But that's a different meeting. Go ahead.
Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue of which our lives were constructed?
Right on. So underline that. We're not all these things, our thinkings, our feelings, and our emotions, how we view the world, our experience with the world, and everything we bring to the table, right? Are not, read that again, we're not these things, the tissue out of which our lives were constructed. I'm a sum result of everything that's ever happened to me, and I don't know how to sort it out. These things are still crippling me and still attached to me, and I'm not free of these things. These things bring me nightmares. These things bring me anxiety. These things cripple my spirit when I get locked in them. I can't find real freedom and happiness. There's got to be there's a better way. That's why we're here. There's a different experience. The experiences of those things that we've had now and then. That feeling of the sunset, the feeling of hope, that feeling of sitting in a meeting and that person sees you and says, good to see you. Right? Anybody? Yeah. That shift of hope changes your whole perspective of the inner idea of this power that's available. It's an outlet of that feeling of hope is pretty cool stuff, right? How many people's gone to a meeting here in total despair? Total despair. And then something happened with somebody talking to you or something happened in that meeting where it kind of lit you up a bit, that you weren't in that despair anymore. And you notice it happened in here? It kind of, where you're sitting in the meeting like this, and then something happens, and you kind of, as you get that energy, that power, it changes your whole demeanor. Even though it's short-lived, we've all experienced it, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, see what they're getting at here? Pretty cool, right? So we're saying, hey, wait a minute, we're working with what we got. We know the audience we're working with, so relax. We know you ain't firing on all the right cylinders. We already know that, right? I mean, when you look at the screen, this is like God's portfolio. You ever see those construction portfolios? This is one renovation. This is another renovation. This is like God's portfolio. Look at this one. Look at this one. You should have seen this one, right? And we're like, wow, you did that with that? Oh, my God. Yes. Yes.
I mean, people are looking around right now. Checking
out what a remarkable job God did with that one. Nobody point at Rob, okay? Okay, go ahead.
But not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence.
Right? Isn't that these feelings have to determine the course of our existence? So we see here, okay, so we change the inside, we change everything.
It was impossible to... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else.
So we're doing the things that is going to ask us to continue, but along different lines. We're putting away the map and we're going to go with a GPS. Right? Pretty hard to drive and look at a map. Yes? You're always in collision with something or somebody, right? And some of the routes have been changed, right? So now we're going to, hey, this idea, this GPS sounds pretty cool, right? Yes? God's prayer system. Yeah, can you get me one of those? Yes, we can. But we need to kind of take you through the fine print here. Go ahead.
What else? Imagine life without faith. Oh, wait, it was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. I read that right, didn't I? In one form or another, we were living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. We're nothing left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that. At least so the chemist said. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who proved that man could never fly? Yet we've been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God had made these things possible, and we only smiled.
I remember when my sponsor was talking about this stuff and their experience with it, I thought they were all nuts. Right? I'm glad I'm that kind of nuts today. Like like they helped me get my cheese and cracker on the same plate, and it's turning in not too bad of a presentation. Okay, go ahead.
We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God.
So this fundamental, this feeling, this thing, this life force, this power, the fundamental, it's there, this connection. When I turn on the radio with satellite radio, once I turn it on, the connection's there. I just got to tune into the station. Everything's there. I just got to tune into the station. I've had brief moments of it, right? I've experienced brief moments of it, but I need to get the connection. I need to get the, what do you call it, the contract signed. I need to get the subscription, right? Without the subscription, I get little tidbits of what's available on the radio station, yes? With the satellite radio, I get tidbits of it, but I never really get to enjoy a whole song. My life's kind of been like that up to this point, right? They're saying, right? They're saying, yeah, we want to hook you up with a life subscription, right? But it's going to cost you a bit, but nowhere near as much as it cost you to get here. Go ahead.
It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, and by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there.
So it may be obscured by what? By calamity, the noise in my own mind, right? By pomp or worship of other things. Yes, I see these things. My solution in people, places, and things. Remember when Bill... He thought, my friend in Montreal still has money, and I'm entitled to some of that money, right? Because he's spending my money and by everything. I'm going to go see. Okay, go ahead.
For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself.
So this week, the exercise is go back over your life, and how many times did you have a voice inside of you trying to get your attention? That voice of, what are you doing? Why don't you call this person? I need help. And then something happened. Remember Bill was in the hospital for the second time? Right? And that level of despair sent out a beacon to the power, the creative intelligence that got him hooked, that sent that message to somebody else, and they gave Bill a call. You here is the result of something that happened inside of you or somebody around you. Right? We're here as the result of something. Something shifted inside. So think back over your life. How many times that life force has tried to get your attention inside of you? Does that kind of make sense? This beacon, this life force, this thing that says, hey, what are you doing? You don't have to live like this. There's a better life for you. And how many people's had that voice? Don't go here. And you didn't listen to it, and you went there, and then afterwards, I should have listened to myself. Right? And then sometimes that voice gets so small. Anybody ever think about somebody here and they call you? So there's something going on here. Maybe more than I'm capable of understanding, but I can't deny there's something going on here. I can't deny the experience of all these people that went before me. There's something going on here. So where do I start from? Go ahead.
We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup. Just as much as that feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search furiously, but he was there.
He was there, this power was there, this connection was there, this life force was there, this frequency was there, whatever you want. This thing inside of us that made us different. This thing that has us sitting, that thing that didn't allow us to kill ourselves. That thing that wants to go on living. Right? Anybody have that here? Yeah, there's something. Go ahead.
He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found, It was so with us.
And where's that? Deep down within. How many people would have came up with that idea in step 2?
Never.
We got to go find this power. Oh, where am I looking? How about within? Whoa, no, it's not there. Right. Okay, good. It was so with us. And here's the process. We
can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself.
Where? Within yourself. It's not outside of. We're going in. We're going in, people. Call back up. We're going in. We're going in uncharted territory, right? We're going to a bad neighborhood. You better bring something with you. Okay, I'm going to bring a power greater than me. I'm not going in there alone, right? Every time I went in there alone, I got shit kicked. Okay, hey, my newfound friend, we're going to go clean up a couple areas in my life that I might need a little help cleaning up. Where are they? Within, right? I carry my own outhouse with me. And it's been full for a while now. But not anymore, right? I got indoor plumbing going on. Pretty cool stuff. Go ahead.
Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
What a thing, right? And so as we talk about the experience here as we continue to read. How it works as a summary on this side of how we're doomed to failure. The process, right? And then page 60 talks about the experience, and what we're living by is not the steps anymore. We're living by these principles in our relationship. Page 60 to 63 talks about the human dilemma. And we're an extreme example of these things. And we need a solution for these things. Because there's no way of escaping ourselves and the bondage of our thinking and the calamity and the horrors within our own mind. We need to find a way to be free of these things. And the accessing of this power makes it possible, provided we took other simple steps. Right? So this week, really try that exercise. You see that this thing's always been with you. We're going to cultivate that. We're going to hook up that GPS system. It's going to be pretty cool. And when you get off track now, it's going to be recalculating, right? And we're going to bring you to a place that beyond anything you could ever imagine, but everything you ever hoped for. Live long and prosperous. Thank you, everybody, for your help and guidance. Let's have some fun.